Hello everyone, this is part 42 of What If Naruto Had a Hug That Changed Everything, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. This is a grown-up's job, you should stay out of it, she said as she idly brushed her hand across Naruto's blonde locks. I must be losing my mind. Or, what a revoltingly touching moment, a familiar hissing voice echoed out from behind the moon of stone. Tsunade shifted her eyes to the side only to see Orochimaru leaning on the rock with his arms crossed. Never knew you cared for the boy so much, Orochimaru mocked. Shut up. If he's allowed to fight, then he'll only get in our way, Tsunade insisted as she yanked her hand away from Naruto's hair. The snake Sannin smiled, but Tsunade, the boy seems so eager to fight him. Why deny him that right? He should see just how fruitless his ambitions really are. HM, he mocked again. Before Tsunade could even retort to that, another familiar voice rung out. You still don't get it, do you, Orochimaru? Jiraiya questioned from the other side of the tall rock. Even if he is a hopeless idiot who can't seem to gauge his enemy's strength for the life of him, he has it. He has that spark, the only thing that one needs to be a great ninja, and that's the guts to never give up. Orochimaru smirked, a touching speech, Jiraiya, but it makes no difference when you're S, does it? He retorted. Jiraiya walked to the other side of the stone mound to J-pin his fellow Sannin, of course. But death won't come to Naruto through Kuro's hand, he said. Now you're dreaming, the pale-skinned Sannin persisted. The moment he wakes up, he'll set himself up for death. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya glared at their sick former teammate, wondering why he had to turn out this way. Just then, the blonde slug Sannin felt a plummeting life force, a life force that reached out to her attention first. It was upon the strike of this feeling that Tsunade's eyes widened with fright. Oh my god, Shizune. A vividly amused Kuro was watching the suffocating Shizune choke and gasp for air as he held her off of the ground by her tea. He would occasionally fall into fits of cruel laughter when she struggled against his unbreakable GS. The kunai that she tried to use on the beast was long since dropped to the ground as both of her hands were now at the base of Kuro's hand, trying desperately to break or at least loosen the death GS. Unfortunately for Shizune, Kuro would tighten his hold around her the more she struggled. You see, child, this is what happens when you don't mind your own damn business. Our Kuro gurgled. Shizune could feel the muscles in her body become weak and numb. The numbness slowly traveled from her legs up. Her lungs started to burn from the inside out from the lack of air and her vision began to haze and fade. Her efforts to take air in have weakened significantly, as so did her efforts to loosen Kuro's GS. As much as she wanted to live, she knew that any chance she had of walking away from this were now slim to none. That very idea was enough to drive her to tears, making Kuro even more giddy with sadistic delight. She wasn't ready to S yet. Suddenly feeling overwhelmed, the brunette Kunoichi's hands fell limp at her side. Her barely opened eyes released one last tear before they closed and her attempts to breathe finally stopped. Seeing this, Kuro's face lifted with worry. Oh my. You don't look so hot, Shizune. As pale as your face looks right now, I think I should test your reflexes, the red-eyed cretin suggested before launching his fist straight into Shizune's stomach. Her eyes flipped open and her mouth gaped as she wreathed silently due to still being choke. The next instant, she passed out again. The re-ya-go. See Shizune, you can still survive. But, perhaps we should give it another jump test, just for good measure, Kuro delightedly said before repeating the same brutal assault upon his victim's stomach, gaining the same desired affect. This time, the cruel tyrant purposely loosened his grip around Shizune's end so that she could struggle to breathe all she wished. It would be nearly impossible anyway, because of the blows she suffered. As a natural reflex, the dark-eyed female choked for air again, only to have Kuro tighten his chicane. Chuckling with sinister intent, Kuro began mercilessly pummeling the living hell out of Shizune's stomach, gaining several more choked grunts and gags. He constantly loosened and tightened his crushing grip around her in an irregular pattern as he continued the brutal beating. Kuro grew even more delighted when he heard Shizune's strained grunts and chokes morph to pained cries and squeals of torment. Loosening his grip once more, the vile devil reeled his fist back and delivered a much harder punch to the stomach, causing Shizune's eyes to widen greatly. In a delayed reaction, a large serving of her blood launched out of her mouth, stained her chin and Kuro's black-sleeved forearm. The rest of the blood splattered the red-haired sadist's face, reflexively licking it off with his grotesquely large tongue. Sweet nectar, Kuro hissed. Shizune's body dangled in Kuro's grip for a short moment before it just hung there, motionless. A rising disappointment overcame Kuro at that moment. He expected her to retain consciousness for at least 30 more seconds. What a drag. HMHP. Oh well, I suppose I should just finish her right here and now, give Suan-chan a little something more to fight about, Kuro murmured to himself. He reeled his arm back and curled his fingers for one final death blow. Well, kid. It's been fun. Really fun. But you've served your purpose, and it's time for you to rest. Don't worry, I salvaged your body so you'd at least make for a decent scratching post for my pets, the devil gurgled. With a chuckle of evil abandon, the mouse brute initiated the final blow. But before he could actually land the blow, he spotted an angry-looking Tsunade rushing in on his flank at super subsonic speeds, Orochimaru doing the same on his other flank. Kuro peered behind him and barely spotted a Rasengan-wielding Jiraiya rushing in from the rear. With a growl of irritation, the Akatsuki warrior threw the worn and torn Shizune to the far side before quickly jumping high into the air and peering down. Damn, interloping Sananile. Ha! Kuro grunted as he saw his mortal enemies vanish out of existence. Wah! What in the? How? Where did they go? The distraught monster frantically searched for any trace of the Sanin but found none. Before searching any longer, Kuro heard what sounded an awful lot like thin paper flying through the air. He turned around and his facial expression changed from curious to just flat out, low-blown surprised. Before he had a chance to do anything about it, hundreds of lit paper bombs went off in his face in a huge chain of sly explosions. Down below, a breathless Kabuto appeared right next to the dwindling Shizune and quickly mounted her upon his shoulder. There, that should buy us a little time to come up with a plan, he said before rushing out of the scene. From out of the thick cloud of smoke, fell the smoldering Kuro with his red trench coat actually sped and tattered on the backside. He landed directly on his back and slightly bounced back up because of the slight recoil. He lied there, in shock. Wow, I actually have to admit that was really good. Whoever the hell that was has my props entile. Kuro stopped in mid-sentence when he spotted a stray paper bomb slowly flutter its way down. In a moment of pure misfortune, the paper bomb fluttered its way onto the center of Kuro's face and lit up for some reason. Quote. Ah. So shut. BOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOMMMM. Upon that last explosion, Kuro was jettisoned into the air again before he crash-landed upon the ground right on his head, planting half of his body into the earth. After a few moments of silence, Kuro spun his legs in random directions while expelling strained and infuriated grunts. In no time, he was able to free his arms from the ground and use them to pull his torso out as well. He flipped his dirtied head and hair back and inhaled some much-needed air. And glared into the wind with a rectangular burn mark on his face. Okay. When I find out who did that, I'll. Wait a second. It must have been that four-eyed kid, Kuro roared as he sensed the lingering presence of Kabuto. He must have slipped out of sight while I was slightly distracted, creating that illusion and trapping me with the goddamn paper bombs. Even though it was a mighty impressive demonstration of well-rounded prowess, Kuro still couldn't help but be enraged that the little snot managed to trick him, take his punching bag, Shizune, and get away from him. After a short while, he couldn't even sense their presence, and that too was really pissing him off. Kuro lifted both of his hands before his face as he clenched his fists in anger. That little S and the whore are gonna pay with their heads for this. GRRAAAH. How dare they trick me? If they think they've gotten away from me, then they're sadly mistaken, the enraged Kerr declared before howling skyward. Do you hear me? I will FIIINDYOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOoooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooooo Taking cover within a nearby cave, the silver-haired Kabuto pressed his back against the wall's edge of the cave from the inside, listening to the echoes of Kuro's threat. Just for a little more reassurance, he further suppressed his flow of chakra more than he already had, knowing that he couldn't afford to take any more risks or chances in this struggle for survival. He stalked deeper into the cave, where an unconscious and nearly Shizune lied. Kneeling next to her, Kabuto did what he did best and attempted to reverse the heavy damage done to her and stomach. However, he knew that he wouldn't be able to do much given the fact that he needed to save his own chakra. To make the situation even more strenuous, he couldn't work as fast as usual because of how much chakra he needed to suppress. But all he really aimed to do was make sure that she survived. He harbored his own reasons for helping her, though. After all, he very well couldn't fight Kuro all by himself, could he? NGH. The damage is far more extensive than I thought, but I can't risk speeding up the process without being discovered, Kabuto said to himself as he tried to pinpoint the major problem areas of Shizune's injuries. Unfortunately for the purple-clad Oto Nin, it seemed as though his suspicions would come to pass as he felt an enormous pulse of chakra just outside of the cave. His first instinct was to stop what he was doing and lay low. Regrettably, the entire left side of the cave was totally demolished, compromising their location. Strangely enough, their founder was not a hulking mass of bloodthirsty death who was after their NS, instead it was Tsunade, glaring right at Kabuto. Tsunade-sama, Kabuto exclaimed. You. What the hell did you do to Shizune? Tsunade demanded with rage seething from her voice. At first, Kabuto was a bit confused, until he peered down and noticed how bad this entire picture seemed. No. This isn't what it looks like. Did you do that to her? Tsunade roared as she marched toward the increasing terrified Jen and Jonan. Kabuto waved his hands defensively in the air. Of course not. Please allow me to explain, was all he could muster before Tsunade's vengeful fist crashed into the side of his face, sending his soaring out of the fray. Since she wasn't exactly in the greatest of moods because of what she saw, the blonde Sannin quickly ran after the flying Kabuto, thus, catching him by his ankle and slamming him to the ground on his back. Tsunade mounted on top of him and grappled the locks of his silver hair as she reeled back for another high-powered blow. Kabuto was barely able to regain his senses from the last assault just in time to see the enraged female Sannin with her fist inches from his face. No, wait, Kabuto pleaded as he inwardly embraced for impact. Obviously not listening, Tsunade was just about to the little bastard's head into the dirt, when all of a sudden. Tsunade-sama. The hazel-eyed woman stopped in mid-punch when she heard the terribly agonized cry from behind her. She whipped around, saw the fallen Shizune, conscious but in ravaged shape. Tsunade-sama. Don't hurt him. He saved my life from that monster, Shizune wreathed. Tsunade stared at her disciple in disbelief, then stared back at Kabuto, whose eyes were shut tightly for obvious reasons. Without even so much as an apology, the blonde kunoichi leaped off of Kabuto and rushed to Shizune's side. Immediately going to work, Tsunade healed the brunette as quickly as she could muster it. You stupid little bee. How could you ever think you could take him on your own? You should have fled and waited for me, Tsunade chastised through her worried state of mind. Tsunade slightly started to regret those words when she saw Shizune in tears. I'm sorry Tsunade-sama. I just can't. Forgive him for taking Nekoshi from us, she sobbed. The ample Sannin cringed at being reminded of that fact. I know, Shizune. I know. Just relax and don't think about it, she tried to comfort. Kabuto struggled to even sit upright as he held his aching face, watching the moment before him. Goddamn, that woman hits hard, he inwardly wreathed, glad I'm not fighting her. Not that the alternative is any better but, still. I see you've gotten to know my former teammate a little better, a dark voice rung out. Kabuto looked up to the side of him and saw Orochimaru standing next to him with his arms crossed, watching Tsunade frantically heal her disciple. The silver-haired shinobi rose to his feet and stood beside his lord. I believe my face has gotten the more beneficial fruit of that particular privilege, Orochimaru-sama, he replied as he healed the growing bruise on his face before it could get any worse. As Tsunade continued her work, the wily Jiraiya came into the fray. When he saw Shizune in such a state, he looked to see his former teammate's expression, and as expected, she looked remarkably pissed off to the point of being consumed with demonic rage. For her to even be able to focus at all on Shizune's injuries was a miracle in and of itself, Jiraiya knew that much. Kuro crushed a giant boulder into tiny pieces with the force of one punch as he continued his search for Kabuto and Shizune. This is thing ridiculous. Why can't I sense them anywhere? There's no way they could have gotten so far away from me without me noticing. Kuro yelled with rage before he stood still for a moment to think. Of course, they could have simply masked their chakra while they formulate some sort of pathetic plan to save their sorry asses. With that notion seeming to be the most logical, Kuro was able to calm down a bit and approach the situation more effectively. Well, guess it's time to continue my seer hello, he cued as he spotted a peculiar sight. What have we here? Only a few feet away, Kuro noticed someone sit against a large rock. The chakra emanating from the form was heavily unsteady. Upon further speculation, the red-haired man deciphered exactly who it was. Well, sleeping on the job are we, Naruto-kun. Such an ill-mannered child you are, Kuro mocked before marching up to the slumbering blonde. As he stood in front of him, Kuro heard him murmuring some sort of nonsensible gibberish, or at least that's what it sounded like. Naruto was obviously dreaming in his sleep. Without any rhyme or reason, Kuro walked right next to the boy, slid down the stone mound and sat beside him with one of his knees angled up, his arm leisurely resting upon it. Kuro peered into the horizon, finding himself enjoying the view. With a sigh of leisure, he relaxed into the rock. Ya no kid, even though you can't seem to amount to anything no matter how hard you try right now, I'm really admiring the fact that you're increasing your efforts to destroy me, no matter how impossible it is. You've really grown in an interesting way, Kuro said to the sleeping boy. He re-sheaved a sleepy grumble in response. Oh yeah? Well that's what your hot mom said. Mahahahaha. Kuro laughed heartily. I wonder where Kushina is now. I never got to finish her off all of those years ago when I had the chance. Meh. I'll eat her the next chance I get. After a while of lounging, Kuro started to hear Naruto actually make sense in his sleepy talk. Just because he was bored and he had time to he listened. Shizune regained consciousness and could feel that the searing pain that engulfed her was now gone. With a soft groan, the brunette slowly opened her eyes and took in her surroundings. The first thing she saw was Kabuto watching over her with care. There you are. For a moment there, we didn't think you would make it, he said in his usual apathetic tone. Shizune steadily rose to an upright position as she caressed her aching How long was I out? She groggily asked. Not long, only about 3 minutes. You have Suen-sama to thank for your speedy recovery. There's no telling what could have happened had she not found us when she did, Kabuto explained. Shizune looked ahead of her and saw all three Sannin standing beside each other as they scanned the horizon. Tsunade standing within the center. Suddenly reminded of her miserable failure at aiding her master as she had hoped, Shizune was racked with guilt and shame. She admittedly lost her cool when she struggled with Kuro and paid for it dearly. Those kind of actions can put an entire mission in jeopardy and she knew it. More and more she wished things would be different, that Nekoshi was with them, fighting alongside them. Driven by guilt, Shizune rose to her feet, stumbling a bit because of the lingering numbness. She timidly approached her master from behind, pressing her fingers together. Tsunade-sama, please forgive me, for being such a burden. I just wanted. Be quiet, Shizune, the blonde snapped without even turning to face her. The dark-eyed Kunoichi reflexively flinched at the snap before her head sunk into her shoulders. She stared shamefully at her master with glistening eyes. Before she knew it, a gentle hand planted upon her shoulder. She looked back and was surprised to see Kabuto, even though there was no one else around, but you know what I mean. Don't worry about it, she's just concentrating, all of them, the silver-haired Jonan assured. They're trying to sense where Kuro is. Shizune lowered her head. I know that, but this is all my fault. If I hadn't been so reckless we wouldn't have lost him, she said with a downcasted tone. Kabuto raised an eyebrow. You're saying you'd rather be fighting him? He questioned. Shizune looked down. Well, she pondered. Growing irritated with the useless bickering, all of the Sannin shot peeved glares at the underlings, shutting them up immediately. With that taken care of, they all recentered their focus to tracking Kuro's life signal, which was proving to be an incredibly difficult task. He's masked his chakra, so it looks like we'll have to find him the old-fashioned way, Jiraiya grumbled with irritation. At least we won't have to worry about him running off. He wouldn't miss a chance to KS for anything, Tsunade added. Orochimaru kept his arms crossed as he peered into the horizon. This has become an even more difficult task than I ever thought possible. I had no idea he could regain this much of his power after such a short time of freedom. It's obvious that he planned this encounter very carefully, he thought to himself. Even despite the differences, the Sannin knew that they would have to rest much more to turn to tide in this battle. If they allowed Kuro to walk away from this fight, things would become impossible for them to seal him away again. There is no other way than that. Who the hell is Sakura? And what the FS and Ino supposed to be? Kuro blurted out when he heard those names in Naruto's sleepy mumbles. Now the kid's just weirding me out. With that, Kuro decided that he was finished listening in on what the boy was dreaming of and focused on more important matters. Well, the spores haven't quite taken the course yet, but they will. Oh ho ho ho, they will, the red-haired monster growled with evil conviction before lifting himself up off the ground, but until then, I should find out about this Sakura and that Ino thing or person, and K them slowly. That will surely bring me one step closer to my goal. Kuro smirked to himself and began marching off. He then stopped, turned partially and shot Naruto a sinister glare. And bring Naruto-kun one step closer to his true destiny. HMHMHMHMHMHMHMHMHMM. Oh yes, he hissed before speeding off into the distance. Now completely alone, Naruto continued to slumber as he dreamed. But he was not really alone. From behind the mound of stone that he rested against, appeared the timid and long-forgotten Tonton. The red-vested pig carefully approached Naruto as he sniffed around the place. The little pig cringed when he caught whiff of Kuro's festering scent, making him shiver with fright. Shaking it off and moving on to more important matters, Tonton proceeded to nudge the sleeping boy with his nose to wake him. He was unsuccessful for the most part, but with a little more persistence, Tonton gained the desired stirs and waking groans. Finally, Naruto awoke. What the? He stammered as he tried to regain his senses. Where the hell a? Gasp. Upon his sudden outburst, the black-clad genin lounged his hands to the spot where he was hit with Kuro's Rasengan. Noticing the dark scar that stained his which was partially exposed because of the hole on the abdominal region of his muscle shirt. A wave of relief rushed over him to see that he wasn't gravely injured. Of course, he got to wondering how, then again, he did still have Kyuubi's healing powers on his side. Growing a little concerned, Naruto began wondering how long he'd been out, and what had been happening during his absence of the fight. So he turned to his inner tenant. Kyuubi, can you hear me? No response. Hey, Furface, you awake? No response. You who? Kyuubi, your mother was born AB. Oddly enough, no response. Huh, that's weird. I wonder if he's really asleep or just ignoring me, Naruto pondered out loud before rising to his feet. Well, it looks like I'll have to find the answers for myself, again. With a sigh, Naruto proceeded to walk in a direction that his instincts decided, that's the correct direction, in case you guys are lost. As he walked, he could vividly remember his quick dispatching when he stood against Kuro for the second time. He could feel the fury building deep within him at the fact that even after all of his threats and down-to-heart declarations, Kuro still continued to taunt and toy with him, always talking down to him and treating him as nothing but a pawn of amusement. It burned at Naruto that someone who has such a vast power difference over him would let him live just so he could toy with him. What pissed him off even more was the fact that he still hadn't acquired the answers he sought. Soon, the deep fury building within, outwardly showed. Naruto's fist clenched greatly as he once again felt the overwhelming urge to put Kuro in his place. In no time at all, the heated blonde dipped into an angry sprint, opening his senses to detect any trace of Kuro. Although, even he had to admit that he had no idea how he was going to stop something as powerful as that. Despite his self-righteous anger, Naruto knew that it would take more than brute force to contend with a monster like Kuro. He was also aware that he needed to stop trying to take him all by himself. You would think that the first encounter with a freak like that would cram that notion right into your skull and make you smart enough to avoid certain injury out of death. As the gears in his mind finally started to grind and turn on the main situation, Naruto's sprint slowly decreased in speed. For all he knew, Kuro could decide to K him without any hesitation the next time he saw him. Then what? Naruto wanted answers. Sure, but are those answers really worth the cost of his life? The blue-eyed demon container recalled Shizun's words before this whole event even started, and finally started to give them some thought. What was the point of challenging Kuro's prowess when all he wanted was a few answers to a few questions? Naruto's sprint soon fell into a simple quick-paced walk as he started to think a little more clearly on the fact. The chances of death were incredibly high and Naruto knew it from the very start. In fact, he was starting to find it more and more difficult to find any way to defeat him. In all honesty, he knew nothing about Kuro, nothing. Without that kind of information, Kuro may have been right, that there was absolutely no possibility of victory for him. With that notion finally rung up as a validated possibility, the blonde's movement completely diminished, standing there with his arms crossed as he thought carefully about his situation. Wait a second, if I keep rushing in like this, he might acutely change his mind about letting me live. If that happens, all that I ever worked for would be flushed down the streeter, plus, Naruto paused in mid-sentence, I can't do that to them. No matter how much I want to see him for their sakes. Indeed, if Naruto ever threw his life away for the sake of someone he loved. No, he didn't think he could muster the courage to do it again. Not after what happened in the fight with Gaara. He could still remember Sakura's tearful reaction when he was revived. Even though he knew she was overjoyed by the fact that she was back in her life, he could only imagine the heart-wrecking pain that he put her through because of his selflessness. He couldn't do that to her or anyone he cared for again. Besides, he still had to patch things up with Ino, a fact that he had completely forgotten about until now. With his head finally in the right place, Naruto once again dipped into a sprint on a trek to find his other allies. Just as Tonton was about to catch up with the wily Naruto, he goes and sprints off again. The little pig sighed before running after him again. The Sannin quickly whipped their attention to their western side when they felt a massive pulse of energy. It soon became apparent that Kuro had at last found their location. Not ignorant to the impending threat, Kabuto and Shizun prepared for what was sure to come. They all focused to the western side and saw a rising cloud of dust. The one creating that dust was none other than Kuro, cackling up a storm as he charged at his old and new enemies at inhuman speeds. Jiraiya, Orochimaru and Tsunade took their place at the vanguard point front and awaited their foe. In a matter of moments, the evil Kuro was within battling distance. It was apparent that he was eager to kick things off again. However, Kuro suddenly took a very different approach from the usual. In an act of cunning, he pushed both of his hands forward, unleashing another wave of his abominable chakra and blowing two of the three Sannin out of the fray, leaving a shocked Tsunade all by her lonesome. Being on a collision course with the said blonde, Kuro vanished before impact and appeared behind Shizun and Kabuto with a smile on his face. They turned about and saw the beast, but before they could react in time, he lifted them both in the air with the force of his chakra, and no, he doesn't have metachlorin. Concentrating a great deal of it, Kuro threw his hands down and crushed his victims into the ground with chakra-enhanced force before snatching Kabuto by the head and tossing him aside, but leaving Shizun. Out of impulse, Kuro reached into his coat and withdrew 8 boomerang-shaped blades before whirling around and throwing them all simultaneously, just as Jiraiya and Orochimaru collided with a mound of solid rock. With pinpoint accuracy, the strange blades hit their targets, pinning the two Sannin against the rock by both of their arms and legs. Why that low-down son of a b, Jiraiya cursed before struggling to break free. Unfortunately, upon any amount of force that was put into that attempt, both Jiraiya and Orochimaru were devastated by a pulse of shocking red energy that sped its way through their boss. They lied motionless for a time before coming to. Well, that didn't work. Wow, you must be a thing genius because that is, by far, the most observant thing you've ever said throughout this entire ordeal, Orochimaru snarled in response. Kuro smiled at his flawless strategy before slowly turning around to face an edgy Tsunade. He looked down at Shizun who struggled to collect herself after the last assault and knelt down next to her while keeping his eyes on his blonde enemy. Remember Shizun, I made you a promise and I shall see it through, Kuro whispered just loud enough for Shizun to hear. Upon hearing those words, the brunette's eyes shot open and suddenly remembered what Kuro had said before their first meeting had ended. That he would have his fun with her before he cared, and he'd make her watch. Now, more than ever, Shizun wanted to get up and help her master, But the cruel Kuro slammed his foot down on the back of her head and pinned her face first in the dirt. The smiling Kuro was delighted to hear an enraged and hateful bellow from Tsunade when he did that, yet she dared not to move since it possibly meant the grisly death of her pupil. Kuro, you monster, Tsunade yelled as she clinched her fist to the near point of break through her skin, let her go. The red-haired villain looked back down at Shizune. Oh, don't worry about this one. In all actually, I have no interest in this piece of pathetic weakling trash, he said before lifting his foot off of her and marching toward Tsunade. The blonde woman fell into a prepared fighting stance and Kuro stopped directly in front of her. It's just you and me now. Kid X. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.